loser. We got a ride from a real fan.
I used to sleep with Lars's grandmother.
Never listen to our music again.
These are my favorite thrash metal albums of the 2020s so far, starting with Enforced with War Remains. This Richmond band continues to bring the real goods when it comes to modern thrash metal. Enforced fully understand the assignment with short songs that hit hard and leave an impact instead of wasting your time, with tracks like Starve and Ultraviolence being prime examples. War Remains isn't winning any awards for being new and original, but if you like aggressive, nihilistic thrash in the vein of Power Trip, this is exactly what the doctor ordered. Then we have Necropanther with Betrayal. One of my favorite underground bands with their killer fusion of blackened thrash and melodic death metal. If you enjoy bands like Hell Ripper and Skeleton Witch, then you need this album. The sheer amount of riffage on display alone is well worth the price tag. Furthermore, each Necropanther album is conceptually centered on a film adaptation, previously covering Dune and Logan's Run, now tackling a combination of 1979's The Warriors and the ancient Greek story of Anabasis on which it was based. These elements only further expanding the impressive scope of their sound. Then we have Destruction with Diabolical. Now, I went into this expecting a very mild, run-of-the-mill thrash album from a very tired old band when this was announced. But once again, what I got was a total rager that sounds like it was performed by musicians still in their 20s. No Faith in Humanity and Hope Dies Last are both rippers. Love the squealy riffing and gang vocals on The Last of a Dying Breed, and State of Apathy is another great single. Total banger, endless riffs. For my money, this is easily their best album since Cracked Brain in 1990. Then we have Terrifier with Trample the Weak, Devour the Dead. From that first chorus of Trial by Combat, it's clear that this Canadian band still clearly worships the sound of the 80s. Fusing the raging thrash attack of bands like Exodus with some wild melodic death metal riffs, Terrifier are a force to be reckoned with. This album is a veritable fire hose of hooks and shredding solos that should please old school and modern metal fans alike. Seriously, check out Bones of the Slain or Grinding the Blade if you think the spirit of classic era metal is dead. Renee Wilkinson clearly sold his soul to the devil and devoured the souls of his contemporaries to achieve this level of guitar proficiency. Then there's Holy Moses with Invisible Queen. What a time to be a thrash fan with the first album from this classic German band in almost a decade. The guitar work on this album is absolutely dizzying, and Sabina's vocals sickening in the best possible way. They also vary up the pacing with tracks like Visions in Red and Forces Great and Hidden, bringing some proggier sections that at times feel almost vaguely psychedelic. Feels like some of the weird riffs of Voivod, but with a much more extreme energy. And speaking of which, we have Voivod with Synchro Anarchy. Really more of a progressive metal album than a thrash album, but it's always fun to see what form these guys will come in. Not only would I put it in their top 3 albums, it made my top 10 metal albums of 2022 overall. Incredible musicianship with a lot of weird technical songwriting, lots of twists and turns to keep you guessing. Those people who comment, you should just be thankful for, like, Metallica even putting out new music, just don't seem to realize how much competition there still is in the 40-plus-year-old band demographic. And also on that note, we have Sodom with Genesis 19. Another album that feels like it carries the same youthful angst of bands even 30 years their junior. Tracks like Sodom and Gomorrah and Euthanasia never fail to get my head banging and my feet tapping. They are fast, hard, and to the point, around 4 minutes each. The alternations between blasts and D-beats alongside the relentless chugging palm mutes and Tom Angel Ripper's Slayer-esque vocal delivery make for some serious mosh pit fuel. At 55 minutes, it could use a little bit of trimming here and there, but I dig it. Then we have Toxik with Morta. Another legacy act coming back with a vengeance and with an album that rivals their 80s classics. The guitar work on this album is absolutely face-melting, and while I'm not always into the falsetto vocal approach, it really comes together well here. Really righteous stuff again with that old school flair. I frequently say I'm tired with most bands recycling old formulas, but when they manage to do it better than anyone else, I have to give credit where it's due. Then we have Sadistic Ritual with the Enigma Boundless. Self-described psychedelic thrash metal. Once more, these progressive leanings make for a very interesting listen. And I also dig the more black thrash leanings of Murmur and Maelstrom of Consciousness, reminding me quite a bit of Watain. Area Denial is my personal favorite with its relentless pace ripping souls and punishing bass tone, but then you've also got the surprisingly fully instrumental The Blood of Memory. Also on a proggier note, we have Vorbid with a Swan by the Edge of Mandala. I am really glad that the audience turned me on to this one because, man, it would have been such a shame to miss out on it. Super rad album with some really impressive songwriting that definitely stands out on this list. Prog thrash is another union I'm particularly fond of, with this having some similar vibes to stuff like Vector mixed with a little Opeth in some of the guitar work. From a songwriting and performance standpoint, it's leaps and bounds above most of the competition. We also have Municipal Waste with Electrofied Brain. Really fun record. I love me some party time crossover thrash, and this delivered on that promise and then some. I was blasting this one in the car pretty much the entire month that it came out with a big smile on my face, and it easily made it onto my favorites list. Non-stop rager after rager, which is especially impressive given its 14 tracks. Electrified Brain, Demoralizer, 10-Cent Beer Night, Paranormal Janitor, just a real blast made to annoy your neighbors. Then there's Kreator with Hate Über Alles. Kreator consistently gets credit for me for having one of the more interesting discographies with all the different eras of their sound, and that trend continues with this one. Feels like a solid progression from the last two releases, mixing thrash, groove, and even some Melodeath, as well as a curveball in Midnight Sun with guest vocals from Sophia Portenay. Not perfect, but definitely an album I listened to quite a few times and still enjoy revisiting. I know it was a bit divisive, but I like how much ground it covers, and it's one of the more, again, interesting and unique albums on this list. Then we have Morbid Saint with Swallowed by Hell. Morbid Saint is responsible for what I consider to be one of the last great thrash metal albums of the classic era in Spectrum of Death, only to basically drop off the face of the earth. That's an incredible amount of pressure to overcome, but I'm thankful to say that the boys managed to live up to the hype. Right from the appropriately titled Rise from the Ashes, these guys bring the speed and aggression as if they never left. 2023 was an amazing year for returning legacy acts in both thrash and death metal, and this in 2024 set a pretty high bar too, even if the year didn't end up being as good. But proof of passion and effort being far more important than age. Then we have Midnight with Hellish Expectations. This is the album I've been wanting this Cleveland Blackened speed metal band to make since the very beginning. For all the hype, I've always found myself kind of lukewarm on their recordings, especially the more they have ventured into longer tracks, but in my opinion, their strength has always been that Venom-esque, straight-for-the-throat energy, and this is that shaved down to the bone. 10 tracks, all under 3 minutes, and for a seriously lean runtime of 26 minutes, and not a second of it is wasted on anything less than Full Speed Ahead, Motorcycle Exhaust, and Blasphemy. Brevity is the soul of wit, but apparently also horny, devil-worshipping punk and speed metal. Then we have Vicious Blade with Relentless Force. Real ripper of a Blackened thrash album out of Pittsburgh that nearly flew under the radar for me last year. Formed by Clarissa Bedini of Castrator, this is just the type of fast and aggressive music I crave in the genre. Throw in Holy Moses and like Midnight kind of mixed together for good measure. Love the occasional vocal variation in addition to the Hellfire guitars and general putrid aesthetic. High energy stuff that actually leaves me wanting more rather than having 5+ minute songs that overstay their welcome. Then we have Flotsam and Jetsam with Blood in the Water. This was another pretty big surprise for me in 2021, especially as somebody who isn't much for the kind of heavy metal style vocals in my thrash. But in spite of my prejudice, my hat's off to Flotsam and Jetsam because this is a spectacular album that holds its own not only on this list, but also alongside stuff like Blind Guardian. The riffing on every song really stands out and it manages to feel both nostalgic and entirely current at the same time. Blood in the Water is a true epic tone-setting opener, Burn the Sky is a rager, and A Place to Die absolutely soars on those harmonized leads. Then we have Cavalera Conspiracy with Schizophrenia. The Brazilian Madmen have done it again, taking one of my favorite albums from the Sepultura catalog and remaking it as raw and heavy as ever. Update the production, all while deeply understanding and respecting everything that made the original so impactful. Not only did they largely keep the original arrangements, they also kind of maintain that 80s metal spirit in the atmosphere. The mix is fuller, but not at all glossy. From the distortion to the heavy use of reverb, this is the perfect balance of old and new. I still love the original version, but this is great. Then there's Cryptosis with Bionic Swarm. Along with Necropanther, this is one of those underdog bands that I like to repeatedly shout from the rooftops. Based out of the Netherlands, their awesome take on technical and progressive sci-fi thrash earned this record a spot on my top 10 albums of that year and make it highly recommended to fans again of Vector. Expect endless hooks and diverse shredding, along with plenty of great scream-along vocals to go with them on tracks like Death Technology and Decipher, but also plotting, industrialized moments that would be right at home on a Godflesh album, as with Prospect of Immortality. They also just dropped a new banger follow-up this year. Then we have Hell Ripper with Warlock Scrim and Withered Hags. The only album on this list to also make the black metal list, and again, Blackened thrash continues to be my favorite style of thrash. This is some truly wicked stuff filled with wailing solos, chugging triplets, and hellish snarls. Tracks like I the Deceiver, The Hissing Marches, and Goat Vomit Nightmare are pure, unadulterated headbang frenzies of punky D-beats, Motorhead hooks, Maiden-esque harmonies, and rumbling bass grooves that never fail to put a smile on my face. While others like the Knuckleve also tie in some Melodeath-sounding riffs a la Dissection. Before I get to my favorite pick, just a reminder to hit the like button if you've been enjoying the video, and also share your favorite thrash metal albums of the decade so far in the comments. And also a few honorable mentions here. We have Megadeth with The Sick, The Dying, and The Dead. Another album I had really no expectations about going in, but when they started to drop the singles, I got pretty hyped, especially with Night Stalkers, one of the better modern Megadeth albums by far, I would say. It's got some lower moments, but I was genuinely surprised how much I did enjoy. Also Testament with Titans of Creation. Not one of my favorite albums on here or from them overall, but there are some really great tracks the deeper you get in. Night of the Witch, Curse of Osiris, and False Prophet, all bangers, and City of Angels, Ishtar's Gate, and Code of Hammurabi have some of their best dynamic songwriting and bass. Also Exodus, Persona Non Grata. Lots of great elements here, from the production to some killer tracks like REMF, Prescribing Horror, and The Beatings Will Continue Until Morale Improves. On the flip side, there are some more repetitive songs, cliche lyrics, and the overall hour runtime makes it a little bit of a chore to get through. Elitist and Clickbait are kind of annoying too, frankly. And also Harlot with Detritus of the Final Age. The fourth album from this Australian band formed in 2006, but they could have easily come out of an 80s time capsule. These guys have really distilled down everything I love most about the classic thrash metal sound and bring those riffs. And a reminder again that this is only covering 2020 to 2024, but there are already some new albums coming out just this year in 2025 that rival a few on this list. And that brings me to my top thrash metal album of the decade so far in Zoth with Exogalactic. I nearly didn't include this Seattle band because they seem to fit into so many styles, from Gothenburg Melodeath to progressive thrash, but regardless, this album absolutely knocked my socks off with its incredible guitar work. In some ways I'd compare it to Ex Mortis, but really this is in a league of its own, which is why it topped my favorite albums of 2023. Some more comparisons to Vector would be warranted as well, with the more progressive songwriting and sci-fi aesthetic, but again with a pretty heaping dose of death metal. For my money, this is one of the most impressively played albums of the decade so far, just in general, and the production gives it enough of a retro feel to go toe-to-toe with some of the classics. Y'all check out this video for my favorite black metal albums of the decade so far, or this one for my favorite death metal albums of the decade so far. But that'll do it for now. Flight of Icarus signing off. I will see you in the trenches.